Guilty on all counts. That's the verdict for a Springfield woman who killed her husband in a gruesome murder.
When I, along with other detectives, walked up,
it was the decapitated body, and the body also didn't have arms or legs, so someone had cut the head, the arms, and the legs off this person.
A young woman with no criminal record ended up committing one of the most brutal murders in Illinois. Juatasha Denton-McCaster was just 24, a college student, good grades, and went to church every Sunday. But she brutally killed a man by cutting off his head and hands and dumping his body in a field. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She just acted like nothing happened. Now she's serving 78 years behind bars. And the big question is, what made a quiet young woman snap like that?
It's a bizarre murder mystery.
I have never seen a case with these strange and heinous set of facts.
That's the verdict for a Springfield woman who killed her husband in a gruesome murder, dismembering him and dumping his torso in a rural county field.
Welcome to Urban Crime Stories. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for upcoming episodes. It was October 29th, 2012 during deer season in Springfield, Illinois. A man was driving home after deer hunting. As he passed by a creek, he saw something strange lying in the grass. At first, he thought it was a dead deer. He kept driving and went home, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he saw. Something didn't feel right. So he called a friend and asked them to go back with him to check it out. When they got there and shined their flashlights on the object, their hearts dropped. It wasn't a deer. It was a human body, but only the torso. The head, arms, and legs were missing. The body had been cut up and left in the dark woods. It was a terrible sight, something no one would ever forget. They quickly called the police. When officers and investigators arrived, they said it was one of the most disturbing scenes they had ever seen. There were no clothes, no ID, and without a head or hands, they couldn't tell who the person was. They looked through missing persons reports, but no one seemed to be missing. The victim had no name, and the mystery had just begun. As they searched the area, they spotted something on a nearby guardrail: bloodstains and napkins. Among the bloody napkins, they found a receipt. That receipt became a clue to the remaining story. The discarded receipts from the Walmart had some explicit tools list. Items like a saw, masks, cleaning supplies, plastic sheeting, and blankets. The next day, they traced the receipt and the credit card through which the payment was made. The credit card belonged to Juatasha Denton-McCaster, a 24-year-old woman with a clean background. After finding the receipts, investigators put Juatasha under 24-hour surveillance to keep an eye on her. Over the next few days, she took out some trash to the curb. After Juatasha deposited her trash on the curb, making it public property, the cops moved in quickly. They secretly seized her garbage, and when they opened the first bag, they found floor tiles she had torn up from her home. It was an odd but not necessarily incriminating find, so they sent the tiles to the crime lab for testing. Investigators were puzzled. Was this young church-going woman simply remodeling her house? Or did she have some connection to the brutal murder? How could someone so petite and with no criminal history commit such a savage crime? The brutality of the murder seemed more like a hit, leading detectives to wonder if it was gang or drug-related. People in Sangamon County just didn't commit this kind of horrible act. While the coroner worked to identify the butchered remains, undercover cops kept a close watch on Juatasha. As CSI continued to sift through her trash, they found something that raised alarm. One bag wasn't garbage at all, but full of men's clothing. Among the items were soldier uniforms, suggesting someone could have been living with her. But the question didn't last long when investigators found an identification card mixed in with the uniforms. As they searched deeper into the bag, they found a man's ID card. It belonged to Norman McCaster, Juatasha's husband. The moment that shook the investigation team, her husband was missing. And the deeper they searched, the darker the truth seemed to get. The detectives then contacted the Illinois National Guard and learned that Norman had missed a mandatory drill. This raised more questions about his disappearance and also a huge red flag. It was time to speak with his young wife. When they arrived at her house, Juatasha greeted them politely. She invited the detectives in without hesitation and offered them drinks. She seemed genuine and calm with no signs of suspicion. Sitting on her couch, she explained to the police that Norman was her high school sweetheart, but that their marriage had been on the rocks lately because of his alleged drug addiction. She claimed he left with some people from St. Louis, but when asked about the car he drove, her answers became unclear. But the detectives weren't convinced. Something about her story didn't add up. Then, they decided to speak with Norman's father, Marcel. His reaction was immediate. He was shocked and confused. Marcel firmly denied that Norman had ever touched drugs, and even more shockingly, he hadn't known that his son was missing. He knew Norman wouldn't just leave without telling him. He would never do that. After Norman disappeared, Juatasha never contacted his family or reported him missing to the police. That silence alone raised red flags. Norman's aunt Keisha was stunned by Juatasha's bizarre stories. "She starts saying all weird stuff that didn't make sense," Keisha later said. "I knew it wasn't right. Norman would have called us if anything was wrong." Detectives then began interviewing Norman's colleagues in the National Guard and his co-workers. Not a single person had anything bad to say about him. He was well-liked, reliable, and disciplined. That contrast between his character and Juatasha's claims only deepened suspicions. Then came the game changer, more surveillance footage. Just a day after buying a saw with Norman's credit card, Juatasha was captured again at the same store. This time, she bought heavy-duty plastic wrap, the kind used for painting or covering large areas. But in the eyes of the investigators, it looked more like a cleanup kit. It was too suspicious, using his credit card, ripping up the tiles in her house, and never reporting him missing. The picture was becoming clearer. With all these mounting signs, investigators made a specific request to the Illinois National Guard. They needed a DNA sample to confirm what they feared. They requested Denton-McCaster DNA from the National Guard records. As a member of the Guard, Norman's DNA was stored at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Investigators compared it with the DNA extracted from the torso found in the woods. The results came back clear. It was a match. The remains belonged to 22-year-old National Guardsman Denton-McCaster. The confirmation devastated his family. Norman's father, upon hearing the truth at the police station in Springfield, was shattered. At first, no one had wanted to say much, just urging him to stay quiet. But once the brutal details emerged, the pain turned to fury. "I wanted to hurt someone. Whoever did this," he later said. Denton-McCaster was a 22-year-old young man with a promising future ahead of him, whose life was tragically cut short in 2012. Born on June 18, 1990 in Illinois, Norman had always been close to his family, especially to his father, who described him as a wonderful son. He had enlisted in the Army National Guard, an achievement that brought him a sense of pride and purpose. As an active member of the Guard, he balanced his responsibilities with his personal life, which was focused on his marriage to his high school sweetheart, Juatasha Denton. Juatasha, 24 at the time, was a student at the University of Illinois, and her life appeared to be on track as she and Norman approached their second wedding anniversary. The young couple had been through high school together, and many expected their relationship to thrive. However, beneath the surface, things were not as perfect as they seemed. The relationship, once full of promise, had started to reveal. As the second anniversary date loomed, tensions between the couple grew. Despite the outward appearances of a happy young marriage, there were deeper issues, including claims from Juatasha about Norman's supposed drug addiction, which she later used as part of her defense during the investigation. Juatasha was still a mystery and under 24 hours observation. Initially, investigators didn't think she could be capable of such a gruesome crime. She was young, well-spoken, a college student, and even attended church. She seemed so innocent. But as the evidence piled up, the detectives' suspicions grew stronger. They began to piece together something far more sinister than they ever imagined. And then, Juatasha dropped another bombshell. She confessed, in a strange twist of words. She hadn't seen her husband since their second anniversary. That's when everything started to change. What really happened on that day? What had she been hiding all along? Did Norman really leave the house on their second anniversary? Or was he kidnapped? Detectives believed they knew who was responsible: Norman's wife, Juatasha. They had been surveilling her for weeks, gathering the strongest case they could. With Thanksgiving approaching and fears she might flee, they invited her down to the sheriff's office under the guise of helping in a missing person case. Juatasha agreed to talk. She spoke calmly, even sweetly, claiming Norman had been abusive. She said their marriage had started to unravel after a fight involving Norman watching explicit material online. The story painted her as a victim, but detectives remembered something strange from her home: a calendar in the kitchen. On it, the date of their upcoming 2-year anniversary was completely blacked out. But the detectives weren't fooled. Weeks earlier, when they had questioned her about Norman's disappearance, she had told them he left with nothing but the clothes on his back. This sudden change in her story was a clear sign that something was wrong. Juatasha was caught in her own lie, and the pressure was on. When confronted with the inconsistency, Juatasha faltered. She tried to stick to her new version of events, that Norman had taken everything when he left. But the detectives could tell she was scrambling. At this point, there was no turning back. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, and Juatasha's version of events no longer held up. The detectives handed her 2 search warrants, one for the couple's home and another for a DNA sample. Juatasha's eyes widened, and her breath hitched as she realized the gravity of the situation. Moments later, she was placed under arrest for the murder of her husband Norman. As Juatasha's trial began, shocking revelations surfaced. Investigators uncovered incriminating search history on her laptop. Starting in June, Juatasha had searched for phrases like "how to kill a spouse and get away with it" and "how to kill your husband." The courtroom was silent as the evidence was read aloud. It was a chilling look into Juatasha's mind in the months leading up to Norman's death. Detectives uncovered even more disturbing evidence, something that pointed to premeditation in Denton-McCaster's murder. A forensic toxicologist testified that Norman's body had unusually high levels of tetrahydrozoline, the active ingredient found in Visine eye drops. In small amounts, it's harmless, but ingested in large doses, it can slow the heart rate, drop body temperature, and even lead to death. This was no accident. Someone had poisoned him, but that wasn't all. Prosecutors then called their star witness, a college student who knew Juatasha. He testified that she borrowed his gun, only to return it a day later, missing 2 bullets. Investigators believed Norman had been shot in the head, which explained why his head was removed, to destroy the bullet evidence. His hands and legs were also cut off, either to hide fingerprints or make his 200-plus-pound body easier to move. Surveillance footage showed her buying heavy-duty plastic, cleaning supplies, and later from another store, a dolly. She even placed an order for a chest freezer, which she later canceled. Police believed she originally planned to store Norman's body in the freezer, but found a way to dispose of it more quickly. But the haunting question still remained: where was the rest of Norman's body? Investigators traced Juatasha's phone and discovered she had traveled up to Chicago, stopping at several bridges and wooded areas. These locations, combined with chilling gaps in time, led authorities to believe that she disposed of Norman's other body parts there: his head, hands, and legs, never to be recovered. For Norman's grieving family, it was unimaginable pain. They couldn't even give him a full burial. His father, broken with grief, said, "Every morning I sit in the car and cry. That's how much I miss him." The detectives had built a clear case against Juatasha, but the chilling realization was that she had planned it all. From her disturbing searches to borrowing a gun and even poisoning Norman, everything pointed to one terrifying conclusion: Juatasha had murdered her husband with cold, calculated intent. But the question remained: why? What drove her to take such a drastic, deadly step? Juatasha was known to be a perfectionist. She succeeded at everything, except her failing marriage. Instead of facing failure, she plotted the unthinkable, and followed through. And in the final gut-wrenching twist, when she was arrested, Juatasha was still wearing her wedding ring, telling detectives she still hoped they could get back together. She never once admitted to the murder. She portrayed herself as a devout woman whose faith had shaped her life. But this strategy faltered under the weight of the evidence. The digital search history, the borrowed gun, the missing bullets, and the toxicology report confirming the presence of vicine in Norman's system. None of it could be explained away by her claims of innocence. The jury saw through her, and the truth was undeniable. After hours of deliberation in February 2014, the jury came to a unanimous decision. Juatasha was convicted on all charges: first-degree murder, dismembering a body, concealing a homicidal death, and obstruction of justice. In June 2014, the court sentenced her to consecutive prison terms totaling 78 years. 55 years for first-degree murder, 20 years for dismembering a body, 3 years for concealing a homicidal death. Sangamon County State's Attorney John Milhiser made it clear that, with the sentences to be served consecutively, Juatasha could spend the rest of her life in prison. This sentence was a statement from the court about the severity of her actions. She had not just taken a life, but done so in a horrifying, premeditated way. However, Juatasha was not ready to accept her fate. In 2017, she appealed her sentence, arguing that it was excessive. She contended that her crime was no more brutal than other murder and dismemberment cases, and pointed to mitigating factors like her young age, lack of a criminal background, good moral character, and the potential for rehabilitation. She even painted herself as a woman who had been led astray, trying to frame her actions as a momentary lapse in judgment. But the appellate court was unmoved. On February 2, 2017, the Illinois Appellate Court for the 4th District upheld the trial court's sentence, affirming that there was no abuse of discretion in imposing the consecutive prison terms. Juatasha's appeal was denied, and her sentence remained in place. Her fate was sealed. Even now, she doesn't accept what happened. Not the murder, not her fate. His family was heartbroken. They just wanted to bury him whole, but they found no remains. His father still cries every morning in his car, missing his only son.
Every morning, I go out to the car, I'll sit there and, I'll cry, because that's how much I miss him.
What seemed like a perfect life from the outside turned out to be full of secrets and ended in tragedy. Thank you for watching this episode to the end. Please share your thoughts about this tragic story in the comments below. We would love to hear your feedback. Remember, if you are new to the channel and like the content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for upcoming episodes. Your support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you on Urban Crime Stories.